Hi, it's Catherine. So today I'm making a video about Autumn by Ali Smith, which is one of the shortlisted books for the Man Booker Prize this year. I heard this book widely touted as the first Brexit novel, which gave me very distinct ideas of what to expect from it, and I really thought it was going to be overtly political, polemical even, about the political discourse surrounding the British decision to leave the European Union last year. I was definitely wrong to think this, but I expected it to be an easy read, so I didn't really give it my utmost attention, and when I finished it, I honestly felt a bit confused. I then watched Jen Campbell's absolutely rave review of the book, and she talked about so many things that I hadn't even considered when I read it, because it just didn't match up to my expectations of what it was going to be about. And I'll link Jen's review in the description of this video because it's a really interesting watch, and I don't think anyone who watches it wouldn't be convinced to read the book. So I waited a little while, I let the book go out of my head, and then I read it again. And I tried to read it without having too many misconceptions or preconceived ideas about it, but just to try and make sense of the slightly abstract prose in a more general sense. I'm really glad I gave it that second chance because I found it a much more fruitful and enjoyable read the second time around. That's not to say there weren't still elements that I thought were a bit confusing, and there are definitely parts of it that I didn't fully grasp, but I think that's mostly because of my slightly lacking knowledge of 60s politics and 60s British art. There's not a lot of hand-holding in this book. However, I did take a lot from it and I thought it was an incredibly clever read. This novel, Autumn, is the first in a series of 4 books, each following one of the seasons, and from this alone you can tell that this is a novel, and a series indeed, that is really interested in the concept of time. The narrative follows a 32-year-old woman and her friend, a 101-year-old man nearing the end of his life, and it's split between segments of the present day, 2016, as well as flashbacks to her childhood and adolescence and how she becomes friends with this extraordinary man, Daniel. It's also interspersed with some far more abstract and odd chapters of Daniel's dreams as he sleeps in a kind of comatose state in his care home. Like the seasons, time is represented as non-linear, as cyclical in this novel, with no marching progression towards either chaos or order. Autumn as a season represents an ending or even a death, and this is very symbolic of the Brexit vote, which felt in many ways like the definite end to a relationship or even like a bereavement. When it was finally announced that the UK had chosen to leave the European Union, it felt like such a momentous moment, like everything had changed all at once, but in actuality it was much more of a symbolic decision, and really nothing concrete has changed. Even now we're no further forward in negotiating us leaving the European Union. If we're experiencing autumn and winter is yet to come, clearly there are lots of tough times ahead, but in Ali Smith's conception of things at least, that means that spring is also going to come, and with that there is a sense of hope, of regeneration and rebirth. This book is riddled with wordplay and punning, and I think the importance of language is one of its main themes. And this definitely connects with the political ideas in the book, because the language surrounding Brexit was increasingly antagonistic, increasingly personal, and increasingly divorced from fact. Language, and in particular political rhetoric, is extremely powerful and has the ability to do great harm if used carelessly, as we've seen time and time again with Donald Trump using phrases such as rocket man and nasty woman. This book really explores the relationship between language and truth, which I find fascinating, and it asks complex questions like, is there such a thing as objective truth? And what's the relationship between storytelling and truth? I find these questions incredibly important, especially now in an age of alternative facts, post-truth and fake news. Another thread running through this novel that I found particularly resonant with our political times is fear of the other, and the main character, Elizabeth's mum, is afraid of Daniel because she thinks he might be gay, and she never really gives reasons for why she thinks this or why she would dislike him because of this. In both the US election and the EU referendum, there was a huge focus on us and them. The rhetoric wasn't usually homophobic, but often xenophobic or just plain racist. In this novel, Daniel makes up a story about a man wearing a tree costume, and he's shunned by people who wear normal clothes, who say, if you got your way, you'd be dressing your kids up as trees, dressing our women up as trees, it's got to be nipped in the bud. I think it's difficult not to see parallels between this and the rhetoric used against Muslims whose religious dress is seen as threatening to the British way of life, and I think this book critiques this as ridiculous. This book is really packed full of different ideas and themes, and one that recurs quite a lot is the importance of women in art, and in particular it brings up the story of Pauline Boty, who was a British female pop artist. It wasn't something that I knew very much at all about before reading the book, so I don't have a lot to add to it, but I would say that this novel is very diverse and wide-reaching, so even if you don't necessarily understand every aspect or appreciate everything of it, there will be a lot that you do really enjoy and do understand. Ali Smith's book is undoubtedly smart, but in some ways I found it a bit too ambitious for such a small novel. It's only about 270 pages and it feels quite a lot shorter than this because it's fast-paced and quite dialogue heavy. It's so rich with ideas that I felt that sometimes smothered the story, and the ideas themselves are sometimes really abstract and multi-layered that it was quite complex to read at times and fully grasp everything. I definitely benefited from reading it twice, and in some ways it's nice to read a book that you get something new from every time you read it, but on the flip side, if a book isn't fully effective the first time you read it, then it's clearly not doing its job right. Overall, I thought this was a really good book. It's intelligent, it's witty, it's very timely. I think it's everything that makes it a really good Man Booker nominee, but it just didn't give me as much pleasure as it would have to be a favourite. I've made 2 other videos talking about 2 Man Booker long-listed books, Solar Bones and The Underground Railroad, so I'll link those in the description as well alongside Jen's review, and also a link to Autumn so you can read a little bit more about it. Please let me know your thoughts on this book if you've read it yourself, and also what you think of the other shortlisted books, because I'm hopefully going to get around to reading those ones in the next few weeks. I hope you enjoyed this video and I'll see you in the next one. Bye bye!